Hello, Archery here with another Dominions 5 video. So, this time I want to talk about precision and buffing archers or mages in terms of their accuracy, and buffing archers in general. Someone was requesting archery buffs and counters, right? So, first I need to talk about precision because this relates to some of the buffs. 10 is like the basic value for precision, and there's an interesting effect with precision in Dominions. I don't know if this is a new thing in Dominions 5 or if it's always been this way off the top of my head, but for every point above 10, it's counted double for precision rolls, right? So precision 12 is rolled as precision 14, precision 15 would be rolled as precision 20, and so on. This means that even relatively small precision buffs make a pretty huge difference for calculating whether or not your unit hits the square it's aiming at. Now, also, arrows are fired on a bell curve so that most hit right around the middle range of where the unit was aiming, with maybe one square off, and some fall short, some fire ahead, right? And basically, the higher your precision gets, the tighter the bell curve gets, and the more likely you are to hit the center point right where you're aiming, right? And this is probably more important for mages than it is for archers, actually, since a lot of spells, especially spells that don't have travel time, right? You're basically, if you hit the target you're aiming at, your mage is going to be targeting the optimal square, which is usually surrounded by other squares you want to hit for AoE spells. So it's very good on archers, and it's super good on mages to increase your precision. Archers and crossbowmen generally have about precision 10. Certain units will have precision 9 or 8. Those are like the inaccurate or crappy units. Often slingers or javelineers will have lower precision as well because of their type of weapon being like less precise, or thought of as less precise, I suppose. Or because they're simply very cheap, like chaff units a lot of the time. Precision 11 or 12, for obvious reasons, is very good because of the doubling effect, right? So a unit with precision 11 is actually quite a bit better than a unit with precision 10. So, this brings us into spell effects. I think under Alteration is where Wind Guide is. So, if I'm reading the Mod Inspector right for Dominions, this increases your precision by 4. Could be wrong, but I think it increases it by 4. It sounds about right to me anyway. And that's a huge bonus, right? 10 to 4 means you're going to fire at precision 18. That's almost doubling the accuracy of your archers. And it affects the entire battlefield. So this means this affects your mages as well. So this is an amazing spell to cast if you have archers and mages. Even if you just have mages, Wind Guide is still good to cast, like if you're Thunderstrike spamming during a storm. Storm reduces the accuracy of all units on the battlefield, I believe. So even when you're Thunderstrike spamming as an air nation, you're at a disadvantage when you're doing that. And there are other spells that affect an area, right? Like Aim is just Wind Guide that only affects a small area, and Eagle Eyes is just Wind Guide that affects just the mage casting it, right? So the other thing to keep in mind is that precision bonuses from different sources don't stack unless that source is a bless and something else. So the bless stacks with everything, and everything except the bless stacks with nothing but the bless, right? So keep that in mind. If you, for example, have, I guess there's not really any way you could, there's a very few cases where you can actually take advantage of this, but if you had Wind Guide and you had like a pretty cheap air bless of 4+4 precision, you could have 18 precision, which would give you 26 precision when making checks. And so for Sacred Archers, you would have incredibly good precision. On mages, this is a little more of a realistic possibility, and for some good mages, because they're elite troops, they will have higher than 10 precision. I don't know if Marignon gets yeah, he has precision 8, -2 for old age, base value of only 10. So these guys are not too great, but maybe if you're playing elves or something, right, you might have higher precision, perhaps. So let's see, what are the other things to talk about? So the other things to talk about are counters to archery and buffs, actual buffs for archery. I don't think there are a whole lot of buffs for archery or ranged projectile weapons, right? It's not just archery. I say archery a lot, I mean projectile weapons of any kind. But flaming arrows is the really notable one, which I believe is in, I always forget where it's at. Is it? Here it is, flaming arrows. Okay, so this adds 8 fire damage to each of the arrows you fire, or projectiles you fire. It works on the throwing rocks ability for the monkey nations. It works on javelins, it works on sling stones, it works on crossbows, it works on bows, works on all sorts of projectiles, right? Dart throwers too, hey, why not? So It's 8 armor piercing damage, which is quite good. It's almost as good as hitting someone twice with a crossbow bolt. And it's going to be effective versus units with up to like 16 protection, right? And because it's magical damage, it will be effective against units who are ethereal and who have other, various abilities. Now, it's a second, it's independent instance of damage, so it doesn't make your regular crossbow bolt hurt ethereal units. It just makes the fire part hurt ethereal units. However, a lot of the time, units aren't going to have high enough protection value to actually really resist the damage effectively, right? Regardless of whether or not they're taking, or basically a lot of units don't have enough protection, more than 16 protection, right? Now in the late age, this is probably going to fall off a little bit because units with like 21 protection are a little more common, and they could actually resist the damage fairly effectively. And if someone is buffing really high protection units, you're going to have a hard time with like ethereal or something. You're going to have a harder time countering it with this. However, Mist Form, which is a really powerful ability, is totally countered because when a unit takes magical damage, it dispels Mist Form. So this will actually completely counter that. And of course, Bark Skin gives units fire weakness, so it's not a very good spell to use against this for obvious reasons. And in general, it's going to increase the damage output of your ranged units quite a bit. In some cases, it'll actually double their damage. In other cases, just the fact that you're getting an extra damage roll that's armor piercing is probably going to hurt most troops it hits, at least a little bit, just really helps you out a lot. Now, that brings us up to 6 enchantment, right? We're two levels higher. We have the all-around arrow counter. Battlefield-wide, the air itself will protect all friendly units from enemy projectiles. So this is Air Shield, and I believe it's Air Shield 80, but it might not be as good as the Air Shield Blast. Maybe it's 70 or something, but I think it's 80. So that's super good. That means there's an 80% chance to negate the spell, the arrow, the projectile, whatever it is. Javelins, rocks, whatever. This also works on against some spells like Blade Wind. Just any physical damage projectile will be stopped. I don't think it works on like fireballs. I assume it doesn't. But I could be wrong. I'm pretty 90% sure. 90% sure, but you never know. So this is just the absolute, just an arrows no. And essentially, at some point in the game, every Air Nation is going to get this. And then archers don't matter for them. But if you're not an Air Nation, this could be... the reason archers stay useful is, of course, because not every nation is an Air Nation. However, some people have, some nations that aren't Air Nations, but they have trouble with archers. It can actually be worth it to take a pretender just so that on any really serious big fight, you can haul them along, and they have air magic, and they cast Arrow Fend, and gives you a huge advantage. Now, keep in mind, this only affects allied units, so if you are an Air Nation, and maybe you're not a Thunderstrike spamming Air Nation for whatever reason, you can cast this spell and just obliterate the enemy with your archers, and you don't have to worry about their archers, and you don't have to worry about friendly fire nearly as much either. So, huge advantage there. Now, the other thing you can do against archery, it's a little easier to access, but it's also an Air Nation thing. So, you're noticing a trend here. All the counters are available to Air Nations, and just Air Nations. So, Storm is really good. It destroys projectiles, essentially. Like projectiles you shoot, some of them disappear. It's a smaller percentage, I don't remember what the percentage is, but I want to say it's like 30%. It's not nearly as effective as Air Shield. However, it also reduces accuracy of the precision of all units on the battlefield by some amount. I don't know off the top of my head what the amount is, but it's probably like 2 or 4, somewhere in there. I'd say it'd be pretty crazy if it was more than 4. I don't remember exactly. But so the counter to that is, you cast Wind Guide, and maybe you have a Precision Bless, and that can be really good for your mages. Like Wind Guide, Precision Bless, you'll actually still have net increased precision during Storm, which is very handy if you're throwing around big evocations. So I think that actually pretty much covers it. There are not a whole lot of other things you can do that directly counter like ranged attacks, projectile attacks. You can counter them in indirect ways, right? Like you can use tactics like putting out a bunch of chaff units, and especially chaff units that are like small size, like size 2, size 1, or they're like relatively high HP for their gold cost, and so you can clump them up and try and get enemy archers to shoot them. It helps if they're ranged, like the Makarta that Bandarlog have, so that when they say fire archers, it can potentially target those units because they have a ranged attack. So basically things you can do to trick the enemy AI, or trip up your opponent depending on their scripting. Stuff like putting a group of crossbowmen, suppose they try to fire archers to hit your mages, right, at the front of the battlefield and set them to retreat from the battlefield. Right? I think that's still possible, and I think you can still do that. You set units to retreat in Dom 5. You never know. I mean, I assume you can retreat still. So, if the enemy archers they, aren't longbowmen, right, especially, because longbowmen can shoot pretty far, but probably the enemy archers can't shoot all the way across the battlefield, so you put your archers at the front, you hope that they'll set their units to fire archers, and then you have your archers retreat out of the battlefield. And hopefully they'll shoot those archers up at the front. And yeah, so what that'll do is that when they get to the back of the battlefield, right, and they haven't quite left yet, the enemy archers will be unable to shoot them, but their orders are to shoot those guys, right? So they will move forward to shoot them. And if your opponent is unfortunate, or you are fortunate, or maybe you've tried to set it up this way, the battle lines are closer to your opponent's side of the field, right? And their archers will move up into them, and then you'll start hitting their archers with your own archer volleys along with their other troops, right? Their troops will be more massed up, and your troops being massed up is bad, right? Because they'll be hit by more AoEs and stuff, right? So that's how that goes. Yeah, but everything else is just tactics and indirect. There are other indirect counters, like, you know, if you get into the late game and you cast Army of like lead, right? I think that gives you like 20 base protection. An alteration whoops, right way up here. Where have we got it? Army of lead, Army of gold. These give you like a huge. These give you metal skin, and Army of gold, I believe, gives 20 protection. Army of lead might only be. I think it's 20 protection too. Army of gold is particularly good because it's fire resistance and protection, and so you're just going to be immune to all arrows with this buff. Excuse me. So yeah, that'll do you pretty well. And there are earlier ones, like if you know the enemy doesn't have access to, what's it called, flaming arrows, right? You can cast wooden warriors, and that'll give you your units base protection 10. Now let's assume they have like 11 protection normally, and they're human units, so they have 2 base protection. You're gonna raise their protection by 8, which gets them to the point where like a lot of short bows and even some crossbows are gonna do pretty crappy damage to them. Well, no, crossbows will still do good damage. What am I saying? But crossbows will do less damage, and short bows will do pretty terrible damage. Won't really do anything, especially if you bring units with shields. Shields, of course, being the one thing that can actually really help you significantly against arrows. So units like these guys, like Man-at-Arms, right? 16 protection. He's also got a shield. Versus crossbows, if the crossbow hits his chest and not his shield or some other part of his body, he's going to take pretty solid damage from that. It's going to hurt. But if he blocks it with his shield, which there's a chance to have happen when an arrow hits someone, then it's not going to do very much damage at all. And then, of course, you've got like very elite units can also be good versus arrows. They're just bad versus mages if your opponent knows what they're doing. Because high protection value, really good versus even crossbows, because it's just so high, and they also have shields, right? But it's not very useful versus attacks that negate armor. So, all right, I think I've covered everything there is to cover about this. Should be pretty good, aside from like actually showing off some crazy advanced tactics and stuff. That might be something for a more advanced video on unit scripting and stuff. Maybe I'll do that sometime. All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Peace out.